Rihanna, one of the most famous and protected women on the planet, had 10 rounds from an AR-15 fired at her home while she, Rocky, and their 3 children were inside. The suspect got arrested, posted bail, walked into court, and pleaded not guilty. And new footage has now surfaced of Rihanna's reaction, of the shooter's own unhinged social media videos, and of the moment this family realized that no gate, no guard, and no zip code in Beverly Hills could keep them safe. Here is how all of it unfolded. A shooter whose social media rants were public for months before she ever got in that car. A neighborhood that heard the shots echo through the valley and could not believe what it was. A mother who pushed her partner to the floor of a trailer while bullets hit the metal around her. And a not guilty plea that sent the internet and Rihanna completely over the edge. This is the full story of the March 8th shooting, the woman behind it, and everything that has happened since. Let's get into it. New footage dropped of Rihanna completely losing it, and the moment you understand what she is reacting to, you will understand why. Because the woman who fired 10 shots at Rihanna's home on March 8th, 2026, while Rihanna, A$AP Rocky, and their 3 children were inside, has since entered a not guilty plea in court. She is still in custody. But the footage that has resurfaced of this woman, the new details from the police report that Rihanna herself filed, and the reality of what that courtroom moment meant for this family, that is what sent Rihanna over the edge. And that is exactly where this story begins. The new footage people are talking about is not footage of the shooting itself. There are no cameras that caught the moment a white Tesla parked across the street from that Beverly Crest estate and unleashed an AR-15 style rifle at the gate. What there is, and what has been spreading across every platform, is the resurfaced video content from the shooter's own social media accounts. Her public YouTube channel, her public Facebook page, videos she filmed herself in her own home, aimed directly at Rihanna. And when you watch them alongside the timeline of what she did next, they stop feeling like unhinged internet content and start feeling like something that should have been taken seriously a long time ago. Then there is Rihanna's side, captured not in an interview, not in a press statement, but in the police report that the Los Angeles Times obtained through court filings. A first-hand account of a woman who was inside a trailer on her own property when the bullets started hitting metal, who woke her partner, who pushed them both to the floor, who ran to find her children the second it stopped. That report is as raw as Rihanna has gotten publicly since this happened, and it paints a picture of a level of fear that no amount of security detail, no amount of wealth, no amount of fame can insulate you from. All of that, the footage, the report, the courtroom, the reaction, is what we are getting into today. But to understand any of it, you first have to understand exactly what happened on that Sunday afternoon in Beverly Hills. The shooting took place in the Beverly Crest neighborhood of Los Angeles, a quiet, leafy, deeply affluent pocket of the city where people do not hear gunfire, where tour buses roll through because the addresses on those streets belong to names you know from billboards and magazine covers. And on that particular Sunday afternoon, at approximately 1:15 in the afternoon, not the dead of night, not some shadowy hour where bad things feel more possible, a woman parked a white Tesla directly across the street from Rihanna and A$AP Rocky's gated property. And she opened fire, and the LAPD dispatch audio captured the entire moment in real time. Beverly Crest is not a place that prepares you for gunfire. It is one of those Los Angeles neighborhoods where houses sit behind tall hedges and iron gates, where the streets are narrow and winding, and the most dramatic sound on a Sunday afternoon is a leaf blower. People are finishing brunch, kids are doing homework, nobody's thinking about AR-15s. And then, that was a neighbor, a real person who lives on that street, describing what he heard with his own ears. 10 shots. In the kind of neighborhood where 10 shots is not something that computes, and what investigators confirmed matches exactly what he described. Approximately 10 rounds from an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle, in broad daylight, in one of Los Angeles' most recognizable celebrity zip codes, at a home where 3 children were living, sons, RZA, age 3, and Riot Rose, age 2, and daughter Rocky Irish Mayers, just 5 months old at the time. Now here is the part that separates this story from every other celebrity security incident you have ever heard about. Rihanna was not away on tour. She was not across the world at some fashion event. She was not safe inside a moving car. Rihanna, Robin Rihanna Fenty, was home. She was on the property. She was inside the Airstream trailer parked in the driveway, the same one she and Rocky had been spending time in. And Rocky was literally asleep beside her when the first shots rang out. Let that sit. She wasn't in a bunker. She wasn't behind 5 layers of security glass. She was in a trailer, and someone outside was unleashing an AR-15 at her property. And the neighbor who spoke to Fox LA? He describes exactly what it sounds like when you're close enough to a shooting to feel it. According to the police report, obtained through court filings and reported on by the Los Angeles Times, Rihanna described hearing what she called approximately 10 loud sounds, like something banging on metal. She processed what those sounds were fast enough to wake a happy Rocky, tell him they were being shot at, and push both of them to the ground, all before the shooting even stopped. That is not a panicked person freezing up. That is a mother and a partner moving on pure protective instinct. And when it was finally over, she and Rocky ran directly into the main house to check on their 3 young children. Also present on that property at the time, Rihanna's mother, 2 staff members, 2 neighbors. This was not a quiet, empty house. This was a home full of people, full of life, and someone drove up to it with a military-grade weapon and started firing. The damage the bullets left behind was significant, and it was close. At least 1 round penetrated a wall of the main home itself. More rounds struck the front gate. Aerial footage from news helicopters shows what appears to be at least 5 bullet holes punched through it. The Airstream trailer that Rihanna had been standing inside? Bullets struck its side. They impacted the trailer near where Rihanna had been standing, but did not penetrate through, near where she had been standing. That is as close to miraculous as this story gets. Meanwhile, the suspect did not stay. She fled. And this is where the LAPD's response becomes one of the most critical pieces of the story. The 911 call had come in at 1:21 in the afternoon. 30 minutes later, police had recovered the AR-15 style rifle and 7 shell casings directly from inside the Tesla. The evidence was right there with her. The suspect did not dump it. She drove away from Rihanna's home with the weapons still in the car. Now you need to know exactly who this woman is, because the story is about to get significantly darker. Her name is Ivana Lisette Ortiz, 35 years old, from Orlando, Florida. She is not someone you would find in any celebrity orbit. She is not an industry insider. She is not a jilted ex or a disgruntled business partner. She has no documented personal connection to Rihanna whatsoever. She is a Florida woman who, by all publicly available professional records, worked as a licensed speech-language pathologist. And she drove from Florida to Beverly Hills with an AR-15 because she believed Rihanna was a witch who was stealing her thoughts, invading her dreams every night, and blocking her from the destiny God had promised her. Let that land before we go any further. Because here is the thing about Ivana Ortiz that distinguishes this case from, say, a random act of violence or an opportunistic crime. This was not random. This was not opportunistic. This was a woman who had spent months constructing an entire internal mythology around Rihanna, a mythological universe in which Rihanna was the villain standing between Ortiz and her God-given future. Every post she made, every video she filmed, every lawsuit she filed, they were all arrows on the same compass, all pointing toward the same destination. And that destination turned out to be a white Tesla parked on a residential street in Beverly Hills at 1:15 in the afternoon. Investigators after her arrest immediately began combing through her social media presence. And what they found was a months-long digital trail of escalating obsession, paranoid delusion, and direct hostility aimed at Rihanna. The trail was not hidden. It was not encrypted or buried in private messages. It was right there, public, on Facebook, on YouTube, time-stamped and archived for anyone paying attention. Her YouTube channel featured a series she titled Variations of Praying Woman's Journal, where she would film herself, sometimes holding a prayer book, sometimes a journal, delivering long, unscripted, completely unraveled monologues directly into the camera. These were not the videos of someone who believed they were doing anything wrong. These were the videos of someone who was utterly convinced they were righteous, chosen, spiritually protected, and threatened by one of the most famous women on earth. And this is what those videos look like. This is a woman filming herself in her home, clutching a prayer journal, describing Rihanna, a global superstar who has never met this woman, as a spiritual attacker sending invisible forces to push her down. And this video was public. Anyone could find it. But the person who needed to find it most never did, until it was too late. Activity on her accounts appeared to spike and spiral in the final weeks before the March 8th shooting, with her last known public posts dating to late February 2026, just 8 days before she arrived in Beverly Crest. Here's a timeline of what that escalation actually looked like. On January 4th, 2026, she posted an early YouTube video referencing Rihanna in a rambling talk-to-camera format. By January 19th through 21st, she had uploaded multiple direct rant videos, some cross-posted to Facebook. And by late February, they had crossed into territory that, in retrospect, reads as something far more alarming than just unhinged social media content. Now I need you to understand what is actually being said here, because this is not someone venting about a celebrity they dislike. This is someone who has constructed a complete alternate reality in which Rihanna, who has never met this woman, never spoken to this woman, almost certainly had no knowledge this woman existed, is actively, spiritually, supernaturally targeting her. In Ulta beauty stores, through stolen thoughts, through dream invasions. From the broader archive of her January and February 2026 videos, investigators and journalists documented recurring claims that Rihanna stole her thoughts, that Rihanna was jealous of everything she does, that Rihanna invades her dreams every night, and that Rihanna blocks her from the life she's supposed to have. She also allegedly said, and this is the part that, in retrospect, reads as the clearest possible warning. Listen, Rihanna, when you die, God is taking me to my future. While clutching a prayer journal, while filming herself, on a platform anyone could access, her Facebook posts were even more direct. On February 23rd, 2026, 2 weeks before the shooting, she posted directly to Rihanna's handle, Ibadgul Riri. Ibadgul Riri, are you there? 'Cause I was waiting for your AIDS 5-head self to say something to me directly instead of sneaking around. She was publicly tagging Rihanna, by name, on a platform that kept the record. Then on February 17th, she posted an image of Drake with the caption, "When Drake found out Rihanna has AIDS." Her last publicly documented Facebook post was on February 28th, 2026, 8 days before she was parked across the street from Rihanna's gate with a loaded AR-15. And before we talk about the courtroom, there is one more layer of Ortiz's legal history that shows this wasn't a spontaneous act. This was a person with a pattern. In October 2025, less than 5 months before the shooting, she filed a lawsuit in Orange County, Florida, attempting to halt a Billie Eilish concert at the Kia Center, arguing the city and promoters lacked proper permits. The case was dismissed as moot after the concert went ahead anyway. She had been using courts and legal filings as weapons for months, filing lawsuits about concerts, posting rants about witches, driving across the country. Think about what that timeline looks like laid flat. October 2025, nuisance lawsuit about a Billie Eilish concert. January 2026, YouTube videos declaring spiritual war on Rihanna. February 23rd, publicly tagging Rihanna on Facebook with hostile, delusional posts. February 28th, her last public post, March 8th. She is in Beverly Hills with an AR-15 in a Tesla. Across the street from the gate, that is a 5-month runway from filing paperwork about concerts to firing a semi-automatic rifle at a family home. 5 months of documented, time-stamped, publicly visible escalation. Investigators have also confirmed that Ortiz had a prior history of mental health involvement, including a reported involuntary psychiatric hold, what is known in Florida as a Baker Act, and a history of child custody concerns. This was not someone who slipped through every system invisibly. This was someone with documented mental health concerns who still, legally, obtained a military-grade firearm and drove it from Florida to California. She was ultimately charged with attempted murder of Rihanna, plus multiple counts of assault with a semi-automatic firearm against Rihanna, A.A.P. Rocky, and their 3 children. Multiple counts, because when you fire 10 rounds at a house where 5 people are present, you are not charged for one act, you are charged for each life you endangered. Bail was initially set at $10.2 million, with some later updates reporting a figure closer to $1.8 to $1.9 million. And the LAPD's Elite Robbery Homicide Division, the same unit that handles the most serious violent crimes in all of Los Angeles, is handling the case. Now here is where this story pivots again, because what happened on March 25th in that courtroom is what sent the internet into its second full spiral, and it is what reportedly sent Rihanna herself completely over the edge. March 25th, 2026, 17 days after 10 shots rang out across the Beverly Crest Valley. Ivana Lisette Ortiz stood in a Los Angeles courtroom and entered a plea of not guilty on more than a dozen felony charges, including attempted murder. She pleaded not guilty. Here is what the news coverage showed. A lot of people saw that headline and immediately panicked, thinking this woman was walking free. She is not. She is still in custody. But the reaction online was swift and furious, because not guilty sounds, on the surface, like the system letting someone off the hook for pulling up to a family home with a military-grade weapon and pulling the trigger 10 times. That instinctive outrage is understandable. The legal reality, though, is more nuanced and more important to understand before we react. Because the way this case is argued in the coming months could determine not just whether Ivana Ortiz goes to prison, but whether this kind of escalation, from social media spiral to physical attack, can ever be caught before it happens again. So let's hear exactly what she is facing first. More than a dozen felony charges. Let that number breathe for a second. Not one charge, not 2. More than 12 separate criminal counts, each representing a different person, a different bullet, a different moment where someone's life could have ended in that driveway. Attempted murder, assault with a semi-automatic firearm against Rihanna, assault against Rocky, assault counts for each child who was on that property. The prosecution is not treating this as a stunt or a scare. They are treating it as an attempt to kill a family. And the weight of that is reflected in what this woman could lose if convicted: life in prison. That is the maximum exposure if she is convicted on everything, and yet not guilty. Now here is what that plea actually means in practice, because this is the part where people's understanding of the American legal system matters most. A not guilty plea at arraignment is not the same as a not guilty verdict from a jury. It is not a proclamation of innocence. It is a procedural starting point. The formal way a defendant says to the court, "I dispute these charges, and I am exercising my right to have the government prove them." Every defense attorney, in almost every serious case, enters this plea on behalf of their client at the arraignment stage. It would be extraordinary and borderline malpractice for counsel to enter a guilty plea before they have had time to review all of the evidence, consult mental health professionals, and understand the full scope of what they're dealing with. Legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Shauna Lloyd explained exactly why. In other words, a not guilty plea at this stage is procedural. It is the standard move. It is not an acquittal. It is not a declaration of innocence. It is defense counsel saying, "We are not ready to commit to anything yet. We need time." And the reason they need time is particularly significant given the content of those YouTube rants and Facebook posts. Because the defense strategy that appears most likely to emerge here is one of the most legally complex available. law enforcement has already said on record that mental health more than likely played a major role in this case. And what attorney Shauna Lloyd is describing is a legal process known as bifurcation, where the jury would have to answer two completely separate questions. First, did she do it? Second, did she have the mental capacity to understand what she was doing? The answer to the second question determines whether she goes to prison or to a psychiatric facility. That distinction matters enormously, and it is precisely the outcome that Rihanna's team is reportedly watching with extreme intensity as these proceedings unfold. If a not guilty by reason of insanity defense is eventually entered, it would completely change the trajectory of this trial. The woman who parked a Tesla across the street from Rihanna's gate and fired an AR-15 at the home where her children sleep. She could, in theory, end up in a psychiatric hospital rather than a prison cell. That is the legal reality. That is what Rihanna is living with right now. Public reaction to the incident was immediate and global. Fans flooded platforms with the hashtags prayers for Rihanna and Rihanna's shooting within hours of news breaking. Ex-user Achetan Bomideni wrote, "Finding out Rihanna was inside the house while 10 shots were fired is actually bone-chilling. She's a mother of 3 young kids. This is beyond a secure ID breach. It's a nightmare." Actor Jack Jones, posting as Mr. Jack Jones, put it plainly. Rihanna is thankfully safe, but shooting at her home with an AR-15 rifle is insane. These guns have no place in a regular person's hands. And then there were the reactions that pointed to something systemic, because there was already a man in 2018 who broke into Rihanna's home and spent approximately 12 hours inside before being apprehended. This is not the first breach. It is the most violent one. And Rihanna has long been known for being publicly interactive with fans who pull up to her home. Tour buses would stop. She'd come out. She'd engage with people. That open-door energy that made her one of the most beloved celebrities alive is the same vulnerability that a woman with an AR-15 was able to exploit. For the latest on where this case actually stands, Ivana Lisette Ortiz is still in custody. She has not been released. Any headline or thumbnail you have seen suggesting she walked free is clickbait. She remains behind bars while proceedings continue. She also faces the prospect of losing her professional speech-language pathology license regardless of what happens in criminal court. Her licensing body in Florida can act independently of whatever the jury decides. And the child custody issues surrounding her own family remain a separate, parallel thread being looked into. But here is the truth that this entire case is exposed in a way that is impossible to look away from. Celebrities like Rihanna are disproportionately at risk of home-based attacks because of their high visibility, their publicly known addresses, and the internet's ability to amplify obsession until it becomes action. History is full of these tragedies. Rebecca Schaeffer, shot at her own doorstep in 1989 by a stalker who obtained her home address directly from the DMV. John Lennon. The pattern is long and it is brutal. What was different this time? What separates the Rihanna case from those worst outcomes is that the bullets did not find their mark, not because the shooter lacked intent, but because the LAPD helicopter was fast enough to tail the Tesla before it vanished. The trailer walls held, and by some margin of grace, no one's child was in that driveway when the shots rang out. What strikes you when you step back from all of the details, the dispatch audio, the shell casings, the prayer journals, the YouTube rants, the bail figures, the not guilty plea, is that none of the warning signs were hidden. Ivana Ortiz was not operating in the shadows. She was posting on public platforms. She was filing public lawsuits about concerts. She was, in her own mind, broadcasting loudly and clearly to anyone who would listen that she had a fixation, a mission, a spiritual war to win. The internet saw her videos. Accounts on X reposted her Facebook posts. People in comment sections called her crazy, and still, nothing connected the digital breadcrumbs to the physical threat until the moment the shots were already fired and the Tesla was already pulling south on Coldwater Canyon Drive. That is the conversation this country still hasn't fully had. Not just about gun access, though that is absolutely part of it, and the fact that a woman with a documented psychiatric hold history was able to legally obtain an AR-15 style rifle and drive it across state lines should make every person deeply uncomfortable, but also about what responsibility platforms bear when a person's post history charts a clear, time-stamped, publicly visible trajectory from eccentric to dangerous, about the gap between this person seems unwell online and this person is now in Los Angeles with an AR-15. That gap, that space where escalation lives and warning signs accumulate before anyone acts, is exactly where Rihanna's family almost became a statistic. And it is the gap we cannot afford to keep ignoring. This is a still developing case. As legal proceedings continue, this channel will track every court date, every motion, every piece of new footage as it surfaces. If you want to be the first to know when the next hearing is scheduled, when new evidence becomes public, or if, and this is the part the internet is watching most closely, Rihanna herself decides to break her silence directly and publicly, make sure you are subscribed and the notification bell is on, because this story is far from over, and neither is Rihanna.